Well, hello, and welcome to the Tactical Business Podcast. I am your host, Wade Skalsky, and today we are speaking with Dylan Hadas from Orlando FFL. Dylan, how are you doing today, sir?
Good. How's it going, man?
It's going good. I feel like I did like an 8.5 out of 10 on your last name, so I kind of like split the baby on a little bit, but I got there mostly.
Yeah, no worries. A lot better than most people. So I'll give you a couple brownie points for that.
Well, you have like that Eastern European kind of last name like I do, right? So it's we got
Sure.
to kind of try to stick together. So,
Yeah,
uh,
that's it.
all right. Well, I'm excited to talk to you today. I know that you're from Orlando FFL, and why don't we just kind of start with for people that don't know your business, and obviously you're where you're located and kind of how you got to be where you are today.
Sure. So yeah, we're in Ocoee, Florida. We're kind of on the cusp between Winter Garden, Orlando, Ocoee, just in that kind of greater area. We're a small shop. We do, obviously we have a small retail section. We do a lot with NFA stuff, a lot of custom work too, Cerakote, slide milling, laser engraving, that sort of thing. Um, we got started probably about almost 6 years ago at this point. We, as much as I hate to say it, we kind of came out of the necessity to have a gun store that is probably a little bit more personable than maybe some of the other options out here. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've walked into maybe another gun store and had a negative experience for this, that, or another. But, our whole goal is to try to be just a little bit different than, another shop or another company. So the service is definitely something that we place a paramount on. We want to be better. We want to just have that spirit of excellence with us, no matter, what's going on that day. It's just, it's part of who we are as a gun shop. And not only that, but a culture. I feel like it is a very important part of firearm ownership is the culture as well. And last thing we want to do is, you have the first time gun buyer that walks in and they maybe, have a negative experience. And I think that actually places a lot of maybe negative connotation on what the firearms industry is like. There are a lot of new gun owners out nowadays, probably more so than there has ever been in history. So, we just want to promote the culture and safety and everything like that the best we can.
Yeah, no, I think that's really smart because, the firearms industry is a big tent and there's a lot of varying degrees of knowledge, right? So you may have your former military guys or former police or SWAT or whatever who are extremely knowledgeable on, everything firearm, but then you have your more people who are like brand new to it, never had a gun before. And so, from that perspective, they're not comfortable at all. And so if you can make them comfortable, I think you just are creating another advocate for firearms.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And that's kind of what we set out to do. It doesn't matter if you say shoot guns every single day or you've never shot a gun before in your life. We set out to create an environment that's, both positive and healthy for all walks of life. So that's kind of our biggest thing.
So what is your background? How did you get into firearms and what sort of made you take that step to go to a retail shop and kind of what you're doing now?
Um, it kind of just fell into place naturally, I guess you could say. When I was younger, I think from the age of 9, that's when I first started to get involved with firearms. It's the typical, oh, my dad took me shooting one time. And before that, though, I was like completely anti-gun, probably just because I didn't know. And it was more or less, kind of the fear of the unknown thing. I didn't understand anything about gun. I was probably a little too young at that time, but I've always liked different types of weapons, I guess. Like I really liked knives and swords when I was younger. But one day my dad just said, hey, I have a handgun and let's just go to the range and see how you like it. So at first it was super intimidating, obviously, the huge loud explosion and you have these things on your head and it's like it's very it's a really unique experience. So but once I did it at first, I shot my first gun, which was a Beretta Neos, which I don't even know if they still make them. They may be, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But after I actually got past that threshold of of that maybe apprehensive type stage. I just was hooked on it. So I spent the next decade or so just trying to figure out and learn everything I possibly could about guns. Even in school, I got in trouble for bringing like those gun catalogs. I don't remember, like the Guns and Ammo, and
Mhm.
they have like the gun catalog, kind of like yeah, kind of like one of these guys. It's got the encyclopedia in the back with all the values, and I had that at school, and I got in trouble a number of different times from just looking at that. But other than that, I do come from a management background. That's what I do here. I'm the general manager, but basically my whole adult life going forward, it basically started with managerial type jobs, and then I actually got acclimated with the shop back in, I think, 2018, I believe, through actually one of our Guns, Cars, and Coffee events. So I walked in, and the atmosphere was not like any I've ever experienced at a gun shop. So from that point on, after that first event, I was hooked with the company, the brand as a whole, and it was just kind of my dream job to be able to run a gun shop. So not only that, like I was saying earlier, I know I'm kind of ranting a little bit, but
No, you're doing great. I
it is
love
what
hearing.
I'm passionate about. So,
Well, and I love
but
hearing about how everyone comes to firearms differently, right? Like everyone always thinks that it has to be, oh, you come from a hunting culture, oh, you came from the armed forces, but that's not your situation. So I love hearing sort of different paths to the same place where people come from. Are you from South Florida originally? Is that where you're from?
I'm from Central Florida. I'm born
Or
and
Central
raised.
Florida? Okay. So yeah, so I mean, so Florida's it's a pretty gun friendly state, obviously, compared to some of the other states. And I don't, and I would think it's more known for its fishing than for its hunting, but obviously there's stuff you can hunt there. Um, but yeah, I mean, I love you're not ranting at all. I love hearing about it. Now, when you started to say, "Hey, I want to do it like general manager and do it with a gun shop," how did that happen with the store that you're at now? Talk a little bit about the guns, cars, and coffee because I think that's an awesome promotion that you guys do, and I love that you make it part of your brand.
Yeah. So with the Guns, Cars, and Coffee, it's one of those things where we kind of recognize that car guys and gun guys are more or less cut from the same cloth. The hobby in a lot of ways is pretty similar. I know that a lot of guys that I also I'm into cars to some degree, maybe not as much now than I was, but it's still something that's on the radar. So, but I know just from experience, being around the car scene, that a lot of people that are interested in cars that are also interested in guns. So I figured it was, and I wasn't the one who initially created this. I can't take credit entirely for it, but I just think it's a good mesh of subcultures, I guess you could say. We started doing them. It was, I think, starting out, it was the first Saturday of every month, and ultimately and unfortunately, it just became a little too much for us. So we've dialed it back down to once a quarter, which we feel is kind of the sweet spot. That gives us a lot of time to not only prepare and every single one we have, there's always some like a standout activity that we do. So obviously it's the raffles and the food trucks and the DJ, like that's present at all of them, but we also like to have some type of activity to do. For example, the last one we did, we have a classroom. Actually, we're in a strip plaza. We own most of the units here, so we actually renovated our classroom where we do the CCW classes to be like a little CQB tactical course. So
Mm.
we had these dividers all set up, and you pay X amount, you get a ticket, you bring the ticket over to whoever's running it. They give you one of those cool fire trainers, which if you haven't seen those, they're super cool. They It's a barrel and recoil assembly replacement for most modern semi-automatic. They're gun specific, but the way it works is they're CO2 powered. So it actually cycles the slide for you and resets the trigger. Not only that, they have a laser module that is integral to the design. So when you pull the trigger, not only does you feel simulated recoil, and you have that, the reciprocating mass of the slide coming back and forth, but you also are able to track hits via the laser. So we had multiple targets set up. The fastest time, won a gift card or something like that.
So it's like adult laser tag, basically.
Yeah, I guess you could look at it like that. That actually is a pretty good idea. We might implement that at one of the next ones. So thank you for that idea.
Yeah, you can take it. I mean, and that's what I love about sort of trying to how can we do things to bring more people into the fold, right? Because if you don't like cars or coffee or guns, then I don't really have anything to talk to you about, right? Except for maybe sports,
Yeah,
maybe, you know?
exactly.
So yeah, exactly. So I mean, I think that's anytime again, and I love talking to everyone's different approaches into how they kind of bring people into the fold and how they make people feel comfortable because someone may not want to come into your shop, might be intimidated by it or arrange, but they'll come, maybe to talk cars and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing too, I guess I could kind of segue into is uh, all kind of along those lines of it being a very intimidating type of environment initially for a lot of people. We do have a YouTube channel that we started pretty recently, which focuses a lot on, kind of parodies of those things. So I think that the whole reason behind it is to help break down the initial wall. And I feel like if you see someone being kind of silly on the internet or personalities and that sort of thing are always seem to be a little bit more inviting than the classic trope of the gun shop where there's a guy with a big old mustache and he's 80 years old. He's like, get out of our store. So we try to just do things a little bit different and have fun while doing it too.
I'm a big fan of that. I mean, I write for the firearms industry, and so I'm always in a battle with some of my clients that they want to take a more traditional approach, which I understand, but it's hard to stand out because it is a pretty big industry and there's a lot of established players. And so if you can have a little bit of fun, it's just, but you can still treat the topic with the seriousness that it deserves when you start talking about it, but you can lead into it with a lot of different fun. And sometimes humor is the best way to convey ideas.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree 100%. The thing with us is, it's about walking that line of, silliness versus professionalism. You have to be able to have people take you serious enough without it being too stagnant or too stifling of an environment. But at the same time, you don't want to maybe get the perception out that you're unsafe or you are, just kind of an idiot or a bozo, for lack of better words. So, that's part of the challenge of it is establishing that middle ground. But no, absolutely. I see what you're saying, that it is a very, locked market. There are some really defined people out there in the industry that are personalities. And, it is harder and harder to stand out as a company and where everyone is basically trying to occupy the same space.
Well, I think one advantage though that you have of having a brick and mortar location versus maybe someone that's just only on the internet is that you have a huge advantage geographically, right? So like you can stand out geographically because the only thing that you're competing with is people that are kind of within your space in Florida, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a lot of people they're like, no, I just want to do the internet, and they maybe only are on the internet and they don't have a brick and mortar, but then they're competing against the whole world, right? And so I think it's really smart for people to have a brick and mortar component like you guys do because it is a hedge against just the internet stuff, at least in my opinion.
Right. And I think that's, it's a double-edged sword and a sword of sorts. So meaning that, the internet is one thing. If you do run an internet business and more power to you, but, a lot of times that those big internet juggernauts are taking away from the brick and mortar stores like us. I don't know if there's any internet personalities, so to say, that run an FFL or do anything like that. But, if you have companies like, I can name drop companies, can I?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Uh,
We're a free speech podcast. So there,
okay, well, I'm glad to hear that. So, Paul Meadow.
Everybody's a big boy in the space. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, okay. I'm glad to hear that. So yeah, Palmetto, for example, they're obviously one of the largest manufacturers of various guns now at this point. And it's great that they have that. They have a huge online presence, but I have a lot of customers that come in and they want me to price match a gun that maybe they have on sale, and unfortunately, I just can't a lot of the time. And the reason for that being is with them being such a large manufacturer, and they cut out the middleman. They either make their own products or they have a deal with a manufacturer where they're direct. For us to go direct with a manufacturer, usually they're going to want a lump sum of money down just as a startup, and we have to take X amount of product. So a small shop like us, it's virtually impossible for us to have 250 units of any one product at one time. And obviously, us being not corporate, it's with the budget and all that, it's quite challenging. So, like, I get it. There's a necessary evil to it, but the brick and mortar versus the internet, it's kind of two sides of the same sword, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a big tent though. And I think there's a space for, Palmetto. And then I think there's also, like I said, but more importantly, locally, right? Because that's where you're going to learn to shoot, or you're really going to learn about guns. Because, if I come into your store and I bring one of my guns, I say, hey, I want you to do some mill work on this or whatever, you start to get a relationship with that person. And also too, is a trust factor where, hey, you can work on my gun. And so I think there is a definite advantages to going to meet people in person, and especially too for your education. So why don't you kind of walk me through a little bit what you guys on your education component, because that is something that online can't do, that you guys can do for like CCW, for Florida, or for whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the right now this is we are still a relatively new company in the grand scheme of things, and as time progresses on, we hope to further and expand a lot of the educational resources that we kind of already do now, but to a greater extent. The one thing that we do offer right now is basically the CCW class. That's what a lot of people call it, but it's actually just a basic handgun class, a basic firearm course, or a basic handgun course. So with that, we do kind of facilitate it a little bit differently than maybe X, Y, or Z company. Ours is more focused on a lot of the practical applications of maybe firearms, a lot of general information, and then the laws too. So obviously, we are in a very volatile political climate. So we try to do our due diligence to the best of our ability to stay on top of the laws as they change, and just be able to present that to people and to keep them in the loop. I know it's kind of daunting a lot of times when it comes to maybe new rules or new laws passed regarding firearms, and there's not really a very good resource for that other than maybe YouTube. And if you are brave enough, you could try to navigate like a government website to try to find those things. So we try not to sell stuff either, really, at our CCW classes. I know that is unfortunately what a lot of other companies do. It's just basically get them in here so I can talk about guns at the shop all day, which I think that is kind of disingenuous to the customer. And not only that, but disingenuous to gun culture as a whole. Like, these people are coming to you to learn something. You better teach them. So that's kind of our whole outlook on it. It's just, and I guess that goes back to the whole customer service thing. We try to be as genuine and as, upfront with people and transparent as possible.
Yeah, well, and I think keeping up with the laws I mean, I'm an attorney, right? So I was a practicing, I was a practicing lawyer for a long time. And
Mm-hmm.
even I get confused as to each state and sort of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And it is a very fluid part of the law, right? So I think that's awesome that you guys try to keep on top of that. And I also think it's smart too, is that, the sales will come if you just provide people what they need, right? And so if someone's coming to you
Yeah.
for a standard handgun class, it's you need to meet that demand, fix that problem first, and then the rest will kind of follow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I tell people this all the time. I'm probably the worst salesman on the planet. I hate being that guy. I've never ever wanted to be that guy. And my team is kind of the same way. Like, we're there to give you information. Guns, you don't need to sell guns. Guns more or less sell themselves, right? So we're only there to provide information. We're very anti-sales tactics. That's just not how we want to conduct business. We hate high pressure sales tactics. We hate just being a sleazeball. We just want to be genuine with people. I find that is the easiest way to conduct business, is if you constantly are lying to your customers and pulling shady stuff, it always comes back. It's never that you fool all the people all the time. Eventually, it comes full circle. And unfortunately, I've experienced a lot of that over the years with not only the firearms industry and other businesses, but just in just general terms. So I feel like just being genuine and upfront creates ultimately less work for you in the end.
Yeah, there's you always want to try to put things that are both the right thing to do, usually with enough perspective, the right thing to do and kind of what's in your interest are the same thing, right? And so,
Right.
and I think you hit the nail on the head with regards to just provide the environment for people to buy, because guns are like tattoos, right? Like once you have one, no one ever stops at one tattoo, right? They're always going to be more than one, right? So
Mhm.
guns are like that too. It's like once you buy a gun and you get into shooting, you're like, it's inevitable you're going to buy another gun.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a big thing. And, we're a gun shop, obviously, but, behind the scenes, we're obviously a repeat customer business. So, we always like seeing the same people, and we build those relationships with those customers. And it's, it creates a better environment because it's, you actually, there's a couple people, customers that I've formed here that are actually really close friends of mine now. So, it's really nice to share that type of, synergy with people and connect with them that way. But at the same time, it's when it comes to guns, there's you have to recognize that there's not just one type of gun owner. Sure, there are a majority of them, like you're saying, will buy one gun and then it never stops it there. It's usually two, three, seven, 12, 100 guns. But at the same time, I do have people that come in and they're like, I'm not really interested in firearms. I just need this to perform its duties as a tool for me, which, I established that it's not my job to stand up here and tell you that you should like guns or not for various reasons. My job is basically just to give you information, give you some insight, maybe sift through some anecdotal information that you hear all the time and consolidate it that way. So it doesn't matter what walk of life you come from, what your interests are. It's not my job to sort that. It's just to provide you what you're looking for.
Yeah, and meet people where they are, and I think I think that goes back to the customer experience is paramount. And so if you try to make someone be what they're not, then they're going to have a bad taste in their mouth, and they're not going to want to come back, or worse, they may not buy a gun or train with it, and then that's doing them an even bigger disservice.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of think of I guess a good analogy that I'm thinking of is you get those big old macho guys at the range, and they have maybe like a Desert Eagle or an absurdly large caliber handgun, 500 Smith and Wesson or 454 Casull, and they're like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if I handed this to my 90-pound wife and let her shoot it? So she's going to shoot it because you said it's okay. She's obviously not going to have a good time if she's an inexperienced shooter. And don't get that wrong. Like there's a lot of women that can handle those firearms just fine. That's not what I'm saying, but it's the inexperience of it. You give it to someone who is maybe smaller in stature that has not even shot a gun before, and from that point, after that negative experience, it, like you were saying, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and from that point on, most of the time, it's the whole gun thing is now a taboo thing, and you don't want to be a part of it. You don't want anything to do with it. So I feel like you can use that as an analogy to describe the retail space of firearms. You go in there as a first time gun buyer, people treat you like a dollar sign instead of a person, and from that point on, they're now your enemy. And I think in this type of environment, we don't have room to create enemies, especially from the legal side of it. We need everyone on our side as possible.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think, and the other part of it too is that, your gun ownership does not, it just starts with buying a firearm. It doesn't end there. It's like you need to train with your firearm to be safe. And so, like you said, if someone comes in and they think, okay, well, I just want to get, this firearm, I feel comfortable with that. And then you try to upsell them to something that they're not ready for and they don't train with it. Yeah, they own a gun, but they're not training with it. It's just in a closet. And if they ever have to use it, it's going to be, even more unsafe for them than if the bit almost better not to have one sometimes.
Yeah, and absolutely. And that's also, we kind of make a point to touch on that. What firearms are to a lot of people is a false sense of security. they think that they have this item that potentially can cause, or not potentially, can absolutely cause, deadly, um, cause like a deadly wound to someone, or however you want to word it. It's, that's one thing, but you have to be able to use that tool to achieve what you're looking at. So I think for a lot of reasons, a gun to maybe a newer shooter is somewhat of a safety blanket. They think that just because I have it, I'm safe regardless, and that's, as you and I both know, is very far from the truth. It's, if you don't train with it, if you don't follow basic firearm safety protocol, it's going to end up being probably more of a detriment than it is an asset to you. So,
Well,
that's one thing we try to tell people, and kind of break down those walls of, anecdotes versus facts and real world application.
yeah, well, and it's complicated because if someone doesn't understand, like, say, the laws of brandishing, for example, right? So like there are certain situations you cannot brandish a firearm; it's illegal. You'll get arrested for a felony, and you're right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the legal sort of level of it. But then there's the secondary level of it is like sometimes if you introduce a firearm, you brandish a firearm, it's not going to end well for you because you don't know what you're doing, right? And so, you up the level of escalation, you make things more deadly, and you could actually end up injured because you're flashing your gun all around when you should never ever do that in certain situations. So, I think, like you said, is it really is important for people to understand that there's many different levels to owning a firearm, and the only way to become competent at it is training and talk to people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I see what you're saying. We definitely in the classes we talk about that. Justifiable use of force in Florida state statute. So, like you're saying, brandishing a firearm. So the law states that um, using a firearm doesn't necessarily, or doesn't only include shooting a gun, which obviously it does, but it also includes having it readily accessible for immediate discharge. So if you pull a gun out and it is, assuming it is loaded and in your hand, that is using a firearm, which is automatic grounds for use of deadly force. So plus, if you have two parties, they could testify against you, and yeah, things can turn very not the way you want if you misuse firearms. So, but unfortunately, not a lot of people grasp that, at least initially, which I think is a problem. But we try to do our best to explain that, and go through it, and outline the do's and don'ts of the legal context anyway of firearm ownership and carrying a gun on you.
Yeah, and you said it, that's really important, is we need to get as many people as we can on our side as advocates because there's a lot of disinformation out there about just guns in general. And so from like people like the movies are basically their main source of information for firearms, and that is not how things work, right? And even the type of firearm. So we did a podcast with a gentleman who they make AK-47s, like that's their business, right? And he told me something, and I really have been thinking about it since, about how like most people view an AK as a bad guy gun, right? They're like, oh, an AK-47, if you own an AK-47, that's a bad guy gun. It's just a gun, and so there's that preconception from the movies that we have to overcome to get people on our side to make guns less scary and more of a tool. And so that's why, I love your guys' approach that you have classes that are connected to your shop, that you really do, like you said, is try to treat the customer holistically instead of transactionally.
Right. No, absolutely. It is a big part of our business. And it's funny that you bring up the kind of the movies and the anecdotal information. What I find is not only is a lot of that very toxic and not genuine, but a lot of times this misinformation is also spread from gun owners themselves. So they think that, oh, you need customers come in, they say, oh, I want a shotgun for home defense. I would say, why would you want a shotgun for home defense? Well, the guy at the other store said that, you go and it scares them off. I'm like, well, I don't think that's necessarily true. And they're like, well, you just aim it down a hallway and squeeze the trigger. I'm like, how big is your house? And I'm like, oh, I live in a townhome. Like, it's not spreading anywhere. I'm sorry to tell you that, but so I think that's important too. Is not only when it comes to firearm ownership do you have a responsibility to obviously be safe and responsible, but I feel like being a gun owner, you have an obligation to be educated and not to spread misinformation because it's easy to not believe someone who is against you, but it's harder to believe someone that is allegedly on your side and an advocate that you're of the same thing that you are. So I feel like that's also kind of a big issue that we see.
Yeah, well, home defense, right? Yeah, okay, so someone you really have to think about, well, what kind of rounds am I using? Because if you have an AR and there are certain types of rounds that you're going to put out an AR that they're going to go through your house, through your neighbor's house, and to the neighbor's house. You know what I you know what I mean?
Sure,
Like if
sure.
shot correctly. So like, you're totally right on that. And that's why I always try to come from a place of like, I know just enough to be dangerous, but I always want to confirm that everything I think is true because otherwise I don't want to be giving people bad information for sure.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And it is even for us as people who try to be on the factual side, it's without looking at evidence or anything like that, like how would you know otherwise? Unless you sit there and you either, tested specific ammunition and guns and that sort of thing, you don't, or if you have some type of resource that has shown you just strictly empirical data, it's hard to sift through what's factual and what is not. So I think that is a challenge as well. So that's what we kind of do. We try to educate ourselves to the best of our ability, just so we can transfer that knowledge to the customer and hopefully, keep them safer. I mean, it sounds kind of general, but I think that we have a responsibility to portray things in a correct factual manner as well.
Well, and you touched on it earlier about, yeah, you could try to go on YouTube and learn things and but if you don't have that local component of someone that you can go to that's skilled or a team of people, right? Because you're not the only person that works at your shop, right?
No, no, no.
So, right. So like whoever many, guys or gals you got over there that you guys get to, if I come in there and I say, hey, what about this? There's going to be a wealth of knowledge there of people that I trust because I've bought a firearm from you. I've taken the class there. I mean, like that's my local range is like that and my firearms instructor, right? So he's a master gunsmith and so, if I have a holster issue or something like that, I go to him. It's like, what do I do? And I think having that local resource, we never want to lose that. And I think that's why supporting brick and mortar stores like what you guys are doing is so important.
Hmm. Yeah, I think to some degree I don't think it's possible to completely eliminate the brick and mortar store. We think about situations like that. Like take Amazon for example. They've basically run off so many different small businesses just from their ability to, go manufacture direct a lot of the times, or be an affiliate seller to keep prices down and ship right to the customer. But legally speaking, obviously we can't do that with serialized components. So I think there is always going to be a need for a firearms, a brick and mortar shop like that. But as more and more online retailers begin to pop up, I think that it might affect us financially. Just going down the line, I know a lot of people are, you can get Magpul stuff, accessories off of Amazon now. You can buy a lot of that, and they offer free shipping and they have these crazy deals with these manufacturers where they can sell and cut out the middleman. And so I still think that it is important to have a brick and mortar shop, but I don't think that, it is still the end all be all, which kind of comes full circle, right? How do you separate yourself from every other local shop when, you provide a minimal at best service just for, transactions?
Well, but I think you guys are doing it with your guns and cars and coffee stuff and your classes and the other thing too though is like so I write for this holster company, right? So I do SEO for them. I write other content for them or whatever. And
Mhm.
and so they're on Amazon, but then if you look on Amazon, Amazon is flooded with foreign companies, right? Or foreign source materials that aren't as good. So you'll be looking at one holster, like, oh, this holster is like $60, right? So why is this holster $60 and this one's 11, right? And so being able to navigate that, is one of those scenarios where, like I said, it's having a contact of a brand that you trust, rather than just trying to go the lowest bidder. I think is like you said, is important for everyone to understand, is that that we do that.
No, I get what you're saying. Um, I don't know. Oftentimes with stuff like that, there's two products that look the exact same. One costs, whatever, and then the other one costs substantially more. I think it's kind of our job to figure out if that, in fact, it is worth that money, or if it's not. When it comes to holsters, it's there's a unless you're buying, I think, something really purpose driven. So maybe like a Safari Land, like a 63, whatever it is. That's obviously something that has a lot more engineering to it. But what I've seen a lot of times is, if you have a molding thing and access to just blank sheets of Kydex, like, you can actually make a pretty good product if you're handy enough. So, the holster industry is kind of very wishy-washy. Everyone has a holster and they all want $1 million for it. But like I said, unless it's something super purpose-driven and niche like that, oftentimes you can get actually something pretty good off of Etsy, which is and pretty good. Just a few bucks, sometimes 15, $20.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what your philosophy is. Like, so for me, if I'm going to conceal carry something every single day, I want to go to somebody who's made 20,000 of them. You know what I mean? Like for my
Right,
gun,
right.
And so when you get some of the smaller, more boutique niche guys, and I'm not saying anything bad about them, it's just a different sort of set of problems, right? Like it takes longer. They may not have the support. But like you said, you just trade off for price. So I guess it's just what you think what's important. For me, I don't buy that many guns. I have a shotgun, an AR, a pistol, and then a long gun, in terms of and um, so when I do parts, I just have to kind of stay in those guns, right? So I can go a little higher on my parts. I don't have 25 holsters I need to buy like some people.
Yeah, I mean, even then, like, I don't have as many guns as I used to. I've really kind of consolidated what I do have. And even then, like, I have maybe one or two carry guns that I rotate out, and I have like a box of holsters for each of them. It's just,
Right.
you think that this is going to be better than maybe this option, and you try them, and you're like, no, maybe I like this one better, and it just
Yep.
is like an ever turning circle of me buying holsters. So, yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things, but I have guys that come in here that have hundreds of guns, like quite literally like hundreds of guns, and
Hmm.
they're always, buying stuff for them. And I'm like, what do you like? Not that it's any of my business. I was like, why do you like own so many? And not that I'm like prying on them or anything. I'm like, what's the general, like the genuine reason? And they're like, yeah, it's just cool. I was like, that's it. You just,
Yes. But
when
yeah,
you like
they
walk
come,
into a room, you just have them all. And he's like,
of
yeah, I mean,
course. As well as like
yeah,
collecting baseball cards, or like you said, like cars. Like some people collect cars, and actually they're a good, some of them are a good investment. We just did a show. My co-host, who sometimes co-hosts with me, John McCoy, and we did a show about some of these like antique ones to invest in and stuff like that. And guns hold their value, and so I think like you said, is like there's a lot of different people with a lot of different ideas on guns. I know the next gun I'm going to buy is I'm going to get a 1022 Ruger for my, because that's what I'm going to teach my son on. It's like, all right, we're going to go start shooting the 22, but I still got a couple of years before I have to worry about getting him on a gun. He's on, so
as many guns as I've owned in the past, I've always said that if there was ever like a zombie apocalypse, it wouldn't be a $3,000 AR. It would be literally like a Ruger 1022 with like cake down with a suppressor and like a Surefire light strapped to it. Like, I think that's probably one of the most proven amazing guns of all time. Like,
yeah.
it doesn't matter what your stance is on guns. Like, if you have whatever preference of manufacturer, I think everyone should have like two or three 22s, at least like 1022s. They're just such a nice little gun. They're basically like a Lego set. There's everyone and their mother makes parts for them, and you can just kind of build them from the ground up. I actually just did one. Some guy bought, we get a lot of those Brownells 1022 receivers in, and I got guys with these big, heavy, bold profile barrels, and they're like sticking it in the freezer to try to get it into the receiver. So yeah, they always bring them to me, and I assemble them for them. But Yeah, the investment thing. I'm kind of glad you brought that up. A lot of people they do try to buy guns for investment, and I feel like a lot of them buy the wrong things or overpay for them. I tell people all the time, if you're looking for guns for investment, there's nothing that you have more potential return on investment with than transferable machine guns. You know, you can get into something right now for, you know, the cheapest probably anywhere between like 9 to 15 for something on the lower end of the spectrum, which it sounds like a lot, but you know, think about the transferable market 10 years ago. You know, those guns that were $10,000 now were like $3,000. So, you know, they think that, oh, you know, why would you ever spend this much money on a gun? You know, why this and that? The truth is, it's, you know, you like what asset could you liquidate that would give you more than a transferable machine gun? There's not a lot. Maybe like real estate or
Got to do a disclaimer. We're not giving investment advice. We're not an investing podcast. Well, but I think the thing about machine guns is that first of all, it scares normal people. They're like, a machine gun, what? Like, you can get a machine gun? Yes, you can buy a machine gun. I don't own a machine gun. Uh, but there's a finite number of them, right? So like it's a very small, it's very that category of firearms is not just going to explode one day for retail machine guns, right? It's for transferable machine guns. So or like and I agree with you is that don't invest in guns as an investment for the future if you don't know what you're doing. Like it is a
oh
very
yeah,
it's a very niche thing to do. And you know, you don't want to go buy a Daniel Defense $6,000 gun and be like, this is my investment, right? So because I think there's a lot of downward, like you talked about Palmetto Armory, right? Like there's a lot of downward pressure on, you know, they just sold an AR that they put 6,000 rounds through and it did fine, right? And then they'll replace it. So there's downward depression, I think, on the market for like ARs. And I think that's why everyone's starting to push like sniper type like setups for things, right? Because everyone's kind of
hmm
AR'd out. But yeah, definitely don't invest in guns unless you talk to somebody who knows what they're doing in a situation. But
no,
then,
like you know, people come in and you know, usually around election season, they're like, oh, I need an AR. You know, I'll buy just whatever the cheapest AR you have is, and it's going to be worth $1 million one day, which is not true because you know the market is super saturated. There's everyone has some type of AR platform, and you know that's why you can get AR so cheap now. Is it's not that you have Colt and Bushmaster. You know, you have Delton, DPMS, Palmetto, Great Lakes Firearms, Androcorp. That that's just the tip of the iceberg. You have so many
oh,
manufacturers
you got
that make
tiny little
stuff.
guys in Texas that, you know, that they have these little boutique shops that, you know, that make, make firearms. I think the big thing is for demand is always going to be ammunition. Like that's because, you know, it's expendable. So meaning that you can only use it once. Whereas obviously if you have a gun that has like the AR platform, 22, 9mm, like these like Glock, for example, you're never going to not be able to find parts for those things. But you know what you're not going to be able to find? Ammunition maybe one day. You know what I mean? Because it's like if there was ever something was to happen, you know. But I'm not a black pill person where I think it's going to be, you know, zombie apocalypse time. I'm more of along the lines of like general degradation of society kind of thing, more than just like we're all gonna be
Right.
dead.
Yeah, and you know that's kind of the thing, and we've kind of seen that. You know, it's not that a lot of people think that you buy bulk ammo because you think that it's the society will just completely collapse one day overnight. But truthfully, it's think about that big scam that happened to us a couple of years ago. You know, people were trying to hoard ammunition, and there was no ammunition available, and we kind of see that. So anytime that there's some type of maybe social or political disruption, it really does affect the supply line of ammunition. And obviously, if you don't have ammunition, then what good is a firearm at that point? So,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, but and it also goes to training too. So like there's a guy that I was watching some of his content and he's of the opinion that if you aren't proficient in like let's say like a pistol for example for like a 9mm or whatever that ammunition is simply too expensive for you to be able to do enough rounds now to get proficient without dry firing or some of the other options, right? Because if you look at like 9mm ammo, what it was 10-15 years ago compared to what it is now, right,
Mhm.
it's a different environment. So do we think that ammunition is going to get more expensive or less expensive in the future?
Yeah, I think it's definitely gonna, as inflation takes hold,
Yeah.
ammunition is always going to become more and more expensive. Is if there's, I can't tell you if there's going to be a plateau for that, if it's ever going to, stop, but most likely not. But yeah, I guess I kind of have a slightly unpopular opinion. So we talk about training a lot, right? I think that um, depending on your skill level with a firearm, I think it is potentially harder to use a firearm more efficiently than you can any type of long bladed weapon. So you give an idiot, some idiot, whatever, just a big old sword, sharp object, and say, swing this like a baseball bat. That's deadly 360 degrees, right? Now, think about this. You have a gun, which fires a relatively small little projectile. You have to now put that tiny little thing in a narrow spot. I think that takes a lot more skill to do efficiently than just have like a bladed weapon. But the media and everything will probably tell you otherwise, that guns are dangerous, which sure they absolutely are, but you know are they the most dangerous thing out there that someone can possess? No, absolutely not. Even if it's not even a weapon, there's a lot of other instruments that a person could use to be efficient in doing not good things.
Well, but that's why training is so important, right? So, like, I think what are the FBI statistics that most gunfights happen at 7 yards? Like, you're like 7. So, if you go to the range and you put the target out there 7 yards, you're like, this is really close. Yeah, it's really close. But when the adrenaline's pumping and, the degrees that you move your gun this way or that way for a handgun means a complete miss, right? And everyone's moving around. It's easy to see how you have these videos of people just like mag dumping and not hitting anything. It's great. And that's why training is so important. And I just
Right,
think
right.
it's,
And
yeah.
a lot of people don't understand that you going to an indoor gun range or you going to any type of flat range, it doesn't really give you the real world training that you need to be as efficient as possible. Anyone can sit there and put a paper target out at whatever distance and sit there and shoot one round a second, which is usually mandated for a lot of indoor ranges. And, they think that it's amazing that they put the same hole on top of itself at whatever distance. Like anyone can do that. The issue is shooting under stress, cover concealment, firearm manipulation, strong hand, weak hand, presenting a firearm, different ways of doing that. It's a lot more than what a lot of people think it is, which is, just going to the range and shooting statically in one position and as much time as physically possible to put every round exactly where you want it to go. So,
Well, and
and
say, yeah. No, and I was gonna
yeah,
say same for drawing from concealment, right? So like it's so okay, yeah, great. You're gonna do appendix carry. Awesome. Well, how fast can you draw safely? How fast can you do it? Right? Is it more comfortable for you? So and all those things, and that's what I love about firearms. And I think when we started the conversation, you kind of made an out, you talked about cars, and that's how they're similar, is that they're so deep. Like there's so much depth to firearms, right? So you can, all the things you just discussed, plus, okay, now let's talk about movement. Plus, let's talk about tactics. All right, what about medical? Like, are you in shape? Can you run? Like, if you need to run, can you run? Like, if you get shot, like, do you know how to do a tourniquet? Do you know how to stop the bleed? Do you know how to, do what to do with a sucking chest wound? Like, it's very deep, and that's why me as a person who is curious and loves to learn, is I can talk about it all day, is because you never run out of things to talk about. People who don't know things about guns think it's just, oh, it's just point goes boom. Like it's the most childlike view of guns humanly possible.
yeah, no, 100%. Like you'd be surprised, if any one of my class, say if there's 30 people in the class, I said, who here knows basic first aid? I guarantee you maybe two or three people will raise their hands. So I'm like, what purpose do you have owning a gun if you also cannot have a discipline in other regards to help keep you safe? So they think that the gun is the end all be all, but like you said, as clear as day, it's more to it than that. It's basic first aid, how to apply a tourniquet, how to apply a tourniquet correctly. I've seen people do some really stupid things. There was this picture actually on the internet that I thought was like, I don't think I've laughed this hard at something on the internet before, but it was, I don't even know where it was, and I'm not sure it's entirely important, but it was some type of conflict overseas, which whatever is going on. And A guy had a cat, combat application tourniquet. Everyone has them. Instead of applying it as you obviously know how you should, um, the whole tourniquet was actually stuffed into the wound like a wound packing.
Mm,
I
mm.
don't. It was. I don't know. Maybe I have a sick sense of humor, but I just saw that and I laughed for probably about 10 minutes. It was just so outlandish that obviously we know what a tourniquet does and how it works, but that was just completely thrown out the window, and the whole thing was just stuffed to the wound.
Well, yeah, and but that's what's so important is because if something, God forbid, if something ever happens, you're not going to remember the YouTube video on that you saw on CPR. You're not going to, you have to practice these things and you have to practice them repetition, like over time to be at all even. It's just like martial arts, right? Like I did martial arts for a long time, many years. But the only thing I really remember was like the first year of stuff or 2 years of stuff, because that's the stuff that I did the most over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And it's muscle memory. Now I can't forget it. All the stuff after a certain point, easily forgettable if I don't keep doing it because it just don't have the reps. And that's for firearms and for medical. And I think what's really important is and maybe this is a good kind of a runway. I want to be respectful of your time to start to kind of bring it up is how do we get people to be responsible gun owners, competent and responsible and good advocates for firearms, right? And what's the best way to do that? I think what you guys are doing on all the different levels is one of the best ways to do that.
Sure, absolutely, and that is kind of a loaded question, right? It's like how do you get as many people on board on the right path as possible? And I think it again comes full circle. It's just about being in a retail space. For me anyway, obviously, different careers in the firearm industry will treat this differently, but at least in the space that I occupy, just being genuine and being as factual with customers as possible, and explaining those things to them. Maybe they didn't even know that. They think that they have these preconceived notions about this, that, or another. But I think it's our job as advocates for the Second Amendment and self-preservation is to also educate others if they want to be educated.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more, and I'm fired up about. I wish I could come to this next Guns, Cars, and Coffee on May 4th. So May the 4th be with you. But because I was looking at those cars too, some of those are looking pretty sweet. But well, listen, Dylan, what is the best way for people to find you? What is your website? Are you guys on social? Kind of give everybody the detail, and if they wanted to contact you, how would they do that?
Yeah, best thing to do, just go on our website, orlandoffl.com. You can reach us via email there. We also have social media, you name it. We're very active on Instagram. So we do a lot of our gun raffles on Instagram as well. So that's just Orlando FFL Instagram handle. So either one, drop us an email or shoot us a message on Instagram. Usually it's myself or one of the other guys that responds to them, but we're pretty quick at it.
Awesome. Well, listen, man, thank you so much for coming on the show today, and can't wait to see what you guys got cooking up next.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.